So, the World Bank on Thursday announced a $750 million funding support for Nigeria to enhance the country's focus on activities on enabling business environment. The funding support from Washington came just as Nigeria was preparing for its 62nd independence anniversary. On Saturday, President Muhammadu Buhari's independence address was loaded with reference to the footprints that his administration has made in the past 7 years. Now, drilling into this for me tonight on the show is a development economist and policy analyst. Professor Ken Ife is live to us from our Abuja studios. It's a holiday evening here, sir, and we thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
We really appreciate it. What did you make of President Buhari's Independence Day address on the side of the economy?
I think it's a modest and honest account of what they have gone through. But I think we have to be a bit fair in our understanding the role that he has played on the economy. In 2008, we had $62 billion in our foreign reserve and $22.5 billion in our excess crude account for the new administration. These were all built up by Obasanjo. And then here you had an administration that came in to meet an empty treasury. And first of all, had to go and find $600 billion for governors to pay salaries. And then didn't have to create new contracts, said to contractors, go back to site. And then had conflict that was taking 22% of the budget. So, we have to be a bit fair in judging what they have done. And I think there is a bit more to what they have achieved, but we will have to see.
Well, a portion of that, President Buhari spoke on the state of the economy, infrastructure, whatever, what his administration has achieved in terms of brick and mortars, in terms of ease of doing business. What's your take on that score if you look through what PEBEC, that Presidential Enabling Business Council, has achieved?
The PEBEC was a big plus, because we saw 1 year when we moved 22 points ahead. That was a good one. It actually stopped us from deteriorating further. The infrastructure, the stock of infrastructure in Nigeria is only 35% of our GDP, compared to South Africa that is over 80%. So we are at the rock bottom when it comes to infrastructure. So it was important that we persecuted those infrastructure. And as I said, it wasn't really about awarding new contracts. It was even safer and cheaper for us to run with existing contracts. And so he said to all the contractors, go back to site. So, because if you cancel contracts and award new contracts, you will be in court with all of them. You won't even have money to pay them, and you won't have money to finance the new contracts. So it made sense. The issue was no longer about whether we should do infrastructure. The issue was how quickly can we find money to pay for these. At least to maintain the service. So that was a different level of argument. But I think they tried. We also have so much problem. Look at the rail line. You have problem on the rail. The work is just the years of neglect. The last time there was investment in rail was in 1923. So now they are coming to terms with what needs to be done, but there's still a long way to go. There's so much work more to go. Population has increased. Over 70 million more people have been added. Food, we are feeding 300 million, not 200 million, because all these 100 million francophones surrounding us are feeding here. So it's very, very tough time. And I think we have to be a bit fair in judging the achievement.
So I'm going back to still sticking with the ease of doing business on that. Do you think we've really achieved? We've really moved the needle over the last 7 years in terms of the ease of doing business in the country?
No, we could do more, without a doubt. But I need to appreciate Central World Bank for the work they are doing in Nigeria. One, because they are very central to this program of ease of doing business, because it's one of their parameters. Now, they have also doing two major jobs, which you're probably going to talk about, the CFAs and the CEFTAs. Now, those ones are to take the whole agenda down to the subnationals. because we have neglected the subnationals for too long. Now, economy is in the concurrent legislative list. So both federal and state governors are at par. They are all equal players in this area. But we've neglected the subnationals. Now, World Bank has 2 programs that are bringing them in. And that second program is really about ease of doing business at the level of the states. So that is a very good one. The sooner we get the governors to come to terms with what needs to be done to move the economy, the better for all of us. It's not just a federal business.
Yes,
and then, of course, the first one that they did was to bring the legal framework down. So you probably will discuss that.
Yeah, so we'll talk about ease of doing business at federal level against what obtains at subnational levels. And a lot of folks will complain that while the federal government is moving the needle, state governments are doing practically, they are more hindering of business, ease of doing business, than enabling it.
Well, people are entitled to their views. If you look at the 10 measures of performance criteria on the ease of doing business from World Bank, enabling business, 6 of them sit squarely with the federal government. 4 of them sit squarely with the state governments. And there are 2 of those 6 are actually in between. If you look at the state governments, everything to do with land, registering a business is states, in the context of land. Then you have registering a title to a property is the state. These are taking hundreds of days. Then obtaining construction permit. An investor comes, he wants to build, and then he stays hundreds of days to get a construction permit to build and invest in your country, in your state. Then litigation against title, which is the number 4. How long does it take to settle a dispute arising from land in the court? Hundreds and hundreds of days. So those are squarely with the state government. So you could see that is where they have to deliver. Then on the federal government trading across border, both exporting, both importing, then you have other area, minority shareholders, how you deal with them, all at the federal law. Then of course you have the taxes, multiplicity of taxes, and then you have all the things that go on the seaport. So the federal government has a fair share of the restrictions around doing business. So that's what they have been tackling. But we need to get the states on board. Otherwise, federal alone will not deliver significant change. So that's why it's important to bring the state governments on board.
Professor Ken Ife, we will take a break. When we come back, I want us to discuss beyond the textbooks of what the ease of doing business parameters are. On the ground in Nigeria, if you don't have electricity, I don't have good roads, those parameters are not on the World Bank ease of doing business list. So how do we deal with issues around multiplicity of taxes and tariffs? Folks are asked to pay a radio licensing fee when they don't even listen to radio, or they don't own one. So all this ease of doing business nuances, I want you to talk to me, and then we'll talk about $750 million that the World Bank has just given us in Nigeria. We'll talk about how to share the money. We'll be right back, everyone. Back onto the conversation on Nigeria's ease of doing business at the largest economy and most populated African state, marking 62nd anniversary. My guest, Professor Ken Ife, has been chatting to me on this. Professor, just where we finished off, so we talk about the World Bank list of ease of doing business, but we know on the ground, you and I know that roughly 80% of Nigeria's economy is informal. Hand to mouth, man and woman on the street, folks at the bottom of the pyramid. And they're not dealing with the World Bank list. So they're dealing with the day-to-day pressure of doing business. How do we resolve that?
Well, I think we need to come to terms with what the World Bank tried to measure. First, on the level of federal government, they want to know how long does it take you to get electricity installation, install electricity in your office or factory. Now, you know Nigeria, you can install it tomorrow, but then that doesn't measure how much electricity you get. Because I have a study that says that 6% of manufacturers provide power 90% of the time for themselves. So I thank God that we are not measuring that. Then you have the telephone. They look at fixed line. They're not even mobile line. They're looking at fixed line. I don't know how many people have fixed line in Nigeria, but we all have over 150 million mobile phones. Then they now measure minority shareholders. How does the legal framework treat minority shareholders? And we're getting around all those. Then they also look at the trade across border, because trade is in the federal control. Now, how long does it take you? How much does it cost you? And how many processes does it take for you to export? And then the same thing, cost, number of transactions, and does it take you to import? So two measures go to importing and exporting. And then, of course, there's another one. Then you come on the state side. The state side are those four that I mentioned previously. It's all around land and land reform related issues. How long does it take you to register a company at that level? And then if you are going to register a title deed, how long does it take you? And then if you have construction permit that you need to get to start building and investing, then it takes so long. And then if you have litigation, how long does litigation go? And those are in hundreds of days to do this. So that's why it's so critical. Even if federal government plays a greater role, because they have omnibus legislation that went through and all of that. A lot of finance act is smoothing all of that year after year. Federal need to come on board. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult for you to meet it. And investors and businesses are hostage to all of those.
My question relates to one-man business on ease of doing business. I'm talking about the ordinary Nigerians who are looking for daily bread, ease of doing business, a vulcanizer that has to pay illegal fees, whatever. Local governments, state governments are crisscrossing with tax demand. How do we deal with these items that are not on the World Bank list of ease of doing business? That's my question.
No, there are actually, because when you talk about multiple taxation, it goes, remember, if goods are going from one local government to from one state to another state, as you go through local governments, they put all kinds of taxes on the way. Good enough that federal government to reduce the exposure. So you have to get to over 25 million naira before you could go for VAT registration, even before you could even render an account. So they are moving. Federal government is moving in that area. But you still go down to the local government, to the level of that. You still have all kinds of taxes that are chastising small businesses with all kinds of taxes. You go to the market, you see them, you drop your yam, they ask for. So that is still going on at the local level.
Okay, so the World Bank, the World Bank is giving Nigeria $750 million support to enabling business reform program. That was last Thursday. How critical was this funding for the country? How was it supposed to be shared? Because we understand it's going to be between federal and state government. So how does this $750 million support enabling business, ease of doing business in Nigeria at federal and state level?
No, normally, like in CARES, which was on COVID, like in the predecessor, which is SafeTask, and this one, they usually tend to share it equally among the 36 states and FCT, and then keep a small proportion for federal government for managing and coordinating the program and monitoring. So that's how it's done. But I have to tell you this, that it is by result. This program for result, which means, we're interested in your processes, but we're only going to pay you based on your results. So it is a carrot and stick kind of thing, because you're dealing with executive governors. It's so difficult to do business with those. So you have to be as creative as you could see World Bank having acrobatic mentality. Do all this. These are the things we want you to do. If you do them, we pay you. But we'll pay you on the result that you have achieved. So, which is very, very interesting. And it's worked well for them in the previous predecessor, that's the SafeTask, the one that focused on fiscal responsibility at the state level. And I need to explain this because World Bank is actually very methodological in what they are doing. First of all, the first program looked at the legal framework for ensuring fiscal responsibility, delivering transparency, accountability, and prudence in the management of public finance. So they did that, encouraging the states to domesticate Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, which is really a definitive and very well developed act, except that it was lacking in enforcement and punitive measures, which they are now addressing senators and MEPs that are now making it tighten up on enforcement. But otherwise, if the states do, about 23 states have adopted it, and then once you adopt and domesticate, then you create a fiscal responsibility commission at the state level. Now they'll begin to open up the whole medium-term expenditure framework, fiscal strategy, and then the whole transparency requirement in the whole budgeting process to make sure that's an inclusive budgeting and participatory budgeting. So all of those come in, and revenue generation and how they account for those money and how they remit to the central purse. So all of those are covered by the law. Very good and well-written law.
Professor Ife, so how come we're doing so much? But the World Bank, however, says Nigeria's ability to attract local and foreign investment remains low compared to its peers. So what's wrong with everything we're doing?
Well, one of the things that is wrong is just what you are putting your fingers on, that we do not have ease of doing business, that we are falling behind. And I've told you that federal has a role to play, state has a role to play. The sooner that they both do it together, the better. But there are many more things that attract investors. One of them is infrastructure. Because I've just told you, if you are an investor, where would you put your money? You don't go and put your money in a country where you are going to use half of that money to build infrastructure before you can build your factory. That's not what, they will not give you approval abroad for you to come and spend that money. So they will go to countries where the infrastructure is there already. So we are investing on infrastructure. And then also we need to also invest much more heavily on industrial infrastructure. That is in the free trade zones, in special economic zones, have industrial parks, concentrate resources so that people will come there, do their business, not worry about the infrastructure, not worry about anything, and then they can also take it away and re-export them abroad. That is how China started. China dotted all these around the whole Chinese seaports. They put all this, and people came in there, mostly Americans, invested there. Then later they now began to move inland. And that's what we should do, to get more businesses come to concentrated clusters where we can do. And if you look at the same concept of cluster in ICT, you've seen how young people are doing really well, tech hubs. And the tech hubs, Nigeria is number one in the world, in Africa, number one in attracting investment to tech hubs. And then you have all kinds of fintech, agri-tech, ed-tech, health tech, envirotech. It's an explosion. And then you have over 5 unicorns. That is 5 people that have become billionaires in dollar, locally groomed companies. So the young people have taken off in that creative and cultural industry are taking off. So we need to have the same thing go on in the industrial space by making sure that what our ease of meaning business means is that we are unlocking every jam in the value chains. The enable seaports are also very important. You could see the CBN program on RT $200 billion non-oil export. It's targeting seaports and cargo ports to enable them, to free them. How can Ghana, it cost them $7,000 to export 100 tons of cocoa, but it costs $40,000 to do the same in Nigeria. How many times more? About 5 times more. So they're looking at all of that. So all the restrictions and all the problems confronting exporters are being addressed by that major program of Central Bank of Nigeria.
We appreciate your perspectives with us tonight, as always. Thank you so much and have a great evening. Professor Ken Ife, a development economist and policy analyst.